Flack Talk with James Canning, the podcast with the inside scoop on journalists from San Diego and across the nation. If you're a communications pro, have a nose for news, or you're just nosy, this is the podcast for you. Now here's your host, James Canning.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Flack Talk. With me today is Ben Schmitt, the deputy managing editor for the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review. Hey Ben, how you doing today?
Hey James, what's going on, man? How are you?
Good. You know, or as we used to say in Detroit, what up, doe?
What up, doe? You know, I never knew what the doe meant, but I just went with it. Was it from Doughboy from Boys in the Hood?
You know, I don't.
He wore a Detroit hat. I don't know. I always wondered like where that originated. It was what up, dog, and then it became what up, doe, and I just rolled with it.
Yeah, you know, I think you know, for folks who are listening, that's Ben and I know each other from Detroit when we both worked there, and that was it's often a saying. It's like WHATUPDOE, and then there's iterations of that. So we might put a definition in the description, maybe Ben, and then I'll send it to you and make sure that we're both on the same page the next time we start using this thing. Okay.
Well, the one thing I deduced, and we'll get off this, is Boys in the Hood, which is a great movie. Ice Cube plays Doughboy, and the whole movie he has a Detroit Tigers hat on. And I thought, and there's a couple times they say "What up, Doe" to him, and I thought maybe that's where that came from, but I never really put it together. And I'll get off that subject.
All right, we'll check on that. We'll do our homework and put it in. Hey,
Let me know.
I definitely will. So, as I noted earlier, Ben and I know each other from our times in Detroit, primarily when I worked for the mayor of Detroit, and Ben worked for the Detroit Free Press. You know, we worked together on different stories, got to know each other. You know, Ben was part of a Pulitzer Prize-winning team that won a Pulitzer at the Detroit Free Press for a story he did about city government and the mayor, and we're going to get into that a little bit. But Ben was one of these guys in the journalism space in Detroit that I could talk to on a real basis. I could have a conversation with him. You know, we could be real with each other, and you know, we became frankly friendly. You know, I mean, there's this line that journalists and PR people have to have, you know, when it comes to stories and so forth. But I mean, you know, Ben came to my Warrendale cookout. You know, he brought his family. You know, we had beers after the end of my boss's term, those kind of things. So I say all this to you folks because journalists and PR people can have a good relationship and still be professional. And I think that that's an important thing to remember, especially for the young ones out there. Wouldn't you agree, Ben?
Absolutely. And just to clean this up, in case these two guys are listening, Jim Schaefer and ML Elric won the Pulitzer with the Free Press staff. I got a little piece of that, but it was mainly a lot of their reporting. So if those guys are listening, I'm giving you full credit. Good job. But no, definitely we developed a relationship, and sure, we butted heads sometimes, but it was always cordial for the most part. I mean, it doesn't happen like that with every PR person, but we both understood the roles we were playing. I understood that you were in a tough situation, and you understood that I was a part of a big story that wasn't going away and was going to be ongoing for really more than a year. I mean, so yeah, you have to develop a relationship or it's going to get really hard to do your job on both sides. And that does happen too. People get frozen out, and then stories can get crafted differently, or the message from your perspective comes out differently, and that doesn't work either. So I always try to respect what the PR person is doing on the other side, as long as they give me that same respect. And you always did that, James. And then we've been in touch for, you know, decades now. So
yeah,
it's really cool.
Yeah, no, I think it is. And I think, you know, before we jump into it, I mean, again, this is all about the journalists. We're trying to give journalists a voice here. But, you know, one of the things that you just touched on, right? And I've been in situations where bosses wanted to freeze out journalists. You know, they were like, I'm not going to talk to that person. I don't want to talk to them. You know, they don't do the stories that I like to see myself in, those kind of things. And for anybody out there, whether you're a seasoned PR pro or you're, you know, just coming up, that's not a good tactic. And sometimes, you get a boss or, a client who doesn't want to do that. They have this kind of animosity toward journalists. But the reality is that, we're there, it's kind of a reciprocal relationship, and you're there to help each other, and they're not there to give you everything you want. But you need each other. And the idea of like, oh, I'm going to freeze this person out, or I'm going to not talk to them. I mean, Ben just said it, it without your voice, the story gets shaped a certain way, and it's just not a wise thing to do. And frankly, I think that's unfortunately, that's a lot of the stuff we kind of sometimes saw in Detroit there when we worked together, is that, there were certain reporters that, my boss, they got the Elric and Schaefer, right? I mean, they were tough on him, and, sometimes he didn't want to talk to him, and it didn't always help us.
Oh, definitely. I literally had that happen to me this week with a reporter that I supervise, and somebody who's running for office didn't like the way he framed a story that I thought was completely fair. And she sent me a text message saying, I'm not inviting the Trib to anything else that I have. And I was like, what was your problem with the story? And I got no response. And then 2 days later, I was told from another editor that she retracted that statement, and she is going to invite us to things. But it was just like, emotion, and it's something we deal with all the time. And I agree with all your points. It's just not a wise strategy, but it will continue to happen until the end of time.
It will. Well, it'll keep us both employed one way or the other. So that's a good thing.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right, Ben. Well, so let's get into you, man. So, obviously, as we noted at the top of the show, you're the deputy managing editor for the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review. You're a native Pittsburgh resident, but that isn't really where your career has always been. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, like, what got you into journalism? What began your career here?
There's no real magical story. It was kind of an English teacher in high school who liked my writing and kind of pushed me to work on the school newspaper. And I didn't even really do that till my senior year, just because I was out doing other things and, working at night at a fast food restaurant and just trying to, live my life. But then I tried it and I really enjoyed it. And I went on to, Michigan State, and they have a very good journalism school. Excellent. I owe so much to Michigan State. So I got there, and then it just, I started writing stories, and I just loved it. I loved the fact that every day could be different, that I would talk to different people, that I'd get out of the office, all those things. It really just clicked for me. But I'm not one of those cases where I knew my whole life that I was going to do this. I kind of fell into it, and it's the old cliche, like a high school teacher pushed me, and I'm so grateful to her.
Do you, that when you talk about that, there's moments or experiences that really shape us as professionals, and you and I have talked in the past about, your early days in journalism, particularly at this place called the Concord Monitor in New Hampshire, right? I mean, can you talk to our listeners about that and what that experience was like and how you got there? And then just so happened to be that you met a bunch of reporters that you ended up working with over time there as well, right?
Yeah, that was, I bounced, after college. I had an internship in Bay City, Michigan for like 6 months. They didn't hire me. Got a job in Sandusky, Ohio, at a small paper, and didn't even last a year there. And I knew this place called the Concord Monitor in New Hampshire. It was known as a small paper, but a teaching paper. In journalism circles, it was like a really good place to get started. And the editor there was named Mike Pride, who was known for this, for just like building talent, teaching you how to tell stories and write. So I reached out to him, and I wound up there. I got really lucky, and I went up there not knowing anybody. But when I interviewed, I was in the newsroom, and they pointed to this guy, and I could see his hair sticking up over the large computer terminal. We had those old school ones back then.
Right.
And they said, oh, this guy went to Michigan State too. And he's a couple years older than me, and it turned out to be Mike Elric, ML Elric. and we just met and we started talking, and we were just bullshitting, and we hit it off. And then I went back home, and I was back in Ohio, and I got the offer, and I was so excited. I was trying to figure out how the hell I'm going to get out there and get all my stuff there. And then I get a call like literally half an hour later. And this is really on brand for Elric. I didn't know him then, but like he heard about me getting the job, and he's like, "You seem pretty cool. I need a roommate where somebody's moving out. Do you want to move in? I know you don't know me." And I was like, "Yeah, man, let's do it." And that's, we began a professional friendship, and then just a regular friendship. And there was a part of our careers where we split off and went different places. Then he wound up in Detroit, which is where he's from. Mm-hmm. And then he brought me in basically in end of '99. I got there.
Wow.
We worked together for 11 years, and we're still in touch. I was just texting him the other day, actually. We still talk.
That's great. And you said though, like that was a teaching paper, right? I mean, what presidential elections, right? I mean, you get to work on some of those, right?
So you get, you have the primary comes right, the first in the nation primary. You have a front row seat, and I think it was 96. Yeah, it was 96 when I was there. And we're all these young reporters, and we get to cover everybody, Clinton was running for re-election. I covered him once. I covered Hillary Clinton. I covered Bob Dole, Lamar Alexander, Al Gore was there. I was in a diner, and he was eating a bacon turkey club, and I was sitting next to him interviewing him. It was just surreal. And you don't have any choice. You have to go do these stories, and you're raw, but man, you really get the experience, and you see how it works. And all of these journalists were in their 20s, and they all went on to bigger papers. I mean, Jo Becker, she went to the New York Times. I sat right across from her. I think she's won 2 Pulitzers. There's other names at big papers, Scott Calvert, Craig Timberg. I could go on and on. Todd Archer covers the Dallas Cowboys for ESPN. He's on TV. He was in the newsroom. It was crazy, and they really emphasized good writing. And back then, the internet wasn't there yet. It got there toward the end of my time there, but they really worked on sending stories back to you to rewrite and make them better and look for details. And they always use the old adage, show don't tell, stuff that really stuck with me. It was awesome. And all those reporters have stayed in touch with that editor, Mike Pride. He's retired now, and when he retired, I went back to his retirement party. So did Elric, and so did a lot of other people. We thought that much of him, and he did so much for our careers. I mean, I feel very fortunate, and it's so. And we can get into this later, but it's so much different now for young kids coming out of college, with Twitter, Instagram, all the social media. Everything's story. Everybody has websites. Everybody's posting stories. 5 minutes after something happens. And that's good to get the word out. I get that about being a 24/7 news cycle. But I think you can also lose something as far as storytelling goes. You have to find a balance.
Yeah.
So the business has changed so much.
No, it has. It has. Well, and if I remember right, is we're based here in San Diego, this show, and Matt Hall, who works at the San Diego Union Tribune, or what? Shit. Not the San Diego Union Tribune. That's right. But San Diego, it is. San Diego Tribune.
Union Tribune. That's it. Yes.
I can't even remember. Wait. I gotta address this. I can't even remember my own local paper's name. I'm sorry, San Diego Union Tribune. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Matt Hall. He's the opinion editor there. He's done really well for himself, and he also worked with me, and we were good friends, and we also stay in touch. Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy how those one moment, those one locations can really, shape careers. And it sounds like some of those folks that worked there had a wonderful experience, but then also went on to these great things. And I think that's, the type of thing that you don't always appreciate it in the moment. And then maybe you realize a little later on, right?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely.
So, what do you think? So you've been in journalism. We kind of talked about this changing dynamic of journalism. what do you think the difference is between, when you were younger doing this job and now, at the age you are today? How has it changed for you, and has not just the job, but your perspective changed on journalism?
Yeah, I mean, it's I taught journalism for a little while when I was in Detroit at Wayne State, and I would always tell the students on the first day, when I started, I would get an assignment or have a story idea, and I would have all day or even 2 days to work on it. It would be for the next day's paper, and it's not like that now. It's like, get the story, get it online, tweet some details out there, shoot a video on your phone and tweet that out, or put it on Instagram, and rewrite the story later for the print version. If it even goes into print, it's just much more 24/7 and post. And it's just changed so much in that fashion. And then there's so much noise now. People clap back at you on social media. You got to deal with all that. People tell lies about journalists. People demonize journalists. I didn't deal with any of that stuff. I mean, we had letters to the editor and phone calls back then, or we spoke face to face. And I think it's made me a little more jaded. I mean, there's no stopping it, but that's the way it is now. And like back in whenever the rise of the internet was at 96, 97, someone made the decision somewhere to give this content away for free.
Right.
And why did they do that? So now you do have paywalls, but people hate paywalls, and you have some sites that don't have them. And so it's just kind of like, where did that, we were selling our stories and the things we reported on in a printed paper for a price, and then it just went online for free. And
right.
Once you started doing that, you can't really turn back the clock. I mean, consumers are like, wait, I can get this for free, so why would I buy it? And I do the same thing.
Right.
Everybody does.
Well, Ben, I mean, if you had a crystal ball at the time, I mean, you might have been able to ask Al Gore while he was eating that club sandwich, right? He created the internet, didn't he?
That's right. He invented the internet. Yeah.
By the way, I think it's fascinating that you remembered exactly what he was eating. Did that make your story when you were interviewing?
It did make it. Yes.
I mean,
that was, I was taught to look for details, things like that. And I try to pass that on myself.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Detroit and your time there.
That's when things got wild and crazy, and I could spend 2 hours talking about Detroit. Really.
Well, we try to keep this to 30, 45 minutes, so
I get it.
We'll spare folks all of it. But let's talk about some of the highlights, right? So, as we noted earlier, Ben and I got to know each other because he worked at the Free Press, I worked for the Mayor. At the time, the paper had a bureau in City Hall, so they had an office, and there was a couple reporters there. Sometimes Ben was there. And so they kind of got the firsthand look at everything that was happening within the walls of City Hall. And there was a story that really became the big one toward the end of my boss's term. I don't know, Ben, you want to share a little bit about that? I'll let you kind of tell it from your perspective, what was happening. And we don't got to go through all of it. There was 8 months of stuff, but the big thing.
Well, it goes back even more than 8 months, but from my perspective, there was a decision the mayor made, Kwame Kilpatrick, and I was covering police at the time,
right.
Detroit police, and we also had a bureau there in the police headquarters, which is it's no longer there.
Right.
But anyway, he decided to fire a deputy chief named Gary Brown, very abruptly, overnight, and we're like, this guy was pretty decorated and respected. I know the police chief liked him, and he was always, one to give interviews and sharp, and knew a lot about crime trends, and so we're like, why the hell was he fired? What was going on? So the next day, I literally called Elric, my friend from New Hampshire, who was now in Detroit covering City Hall. I told him what happened, and he's like, I'm picking you up. Let's go to his house, to Gary Brown's house.
Mm-hmm.
And we did. We drove to his house. He was there. He spoke to us off the record. But later he would have a press conference, and I think it said he was fired for investigating some allegations about the mayor that were not proven to be true. And you can steer me off this course, but there were some allegations about a wild party at the mayoral mansion in a fight and something that involved the mayor's wife. Again, this wasn't proven to be true, but long story short, Gary Brown said that's why he was fired. So then he sued the mayor. Okay.
Yeah.
And that went to court. And during this trial, we learned that there were these, back then we had BlackBerry pagers. We didn't have iPhones, but you could text on them. And the mayor and his staff, probably you as well, they love that thing. They love those things. They communicated on those all the time.
I had one. I had one.
So back then, those things lived forever. Like, I think when you delete your texts on iPhones, they go away. So long story short, one of the lawyers started asking for subpoenaing the text messages of the mayor because he was trying to catch him in some perjury. And, I could get into all the details, but some of the things were, the mayor had an affair with his chief of staff and that the text messages would show this. Well, the text messages were delivered to the judge but kept under seal, and eventually the Free Press got those messages, and they indeed showed that the mayor and the chief of staff lied under oath about the affair. That's what got the ball rolling. The Free Press printed these, and everything just went crazy. Nobody knew what to do from a prosecutorial standpoint. The Wayne County prosecutor wound up charging him with perjury, and she charged the chief of staff. The mayor took a plea. He resigned. He did not a lot of time. I think he did, 9 months or something. I can't remember. But then all these other messages led to federal RICO stuff, and that was, I think, we were both gone by then. Yeah. And then that's where he went to jail for like a long time, like 10 years. But that's what got the ball rolling. So obviously, it was just insane. There was a lot of tension. There was like a development every day, and that's where a lot of the other reporters got involved because Schaefer and Elric literally could not just cover all the developments. It was happening every day. So we got involved, and I remember trying to talk to the mayor somewhere in Detroit, and one of his security detail shoved me, and I was yelling at him, and it happened to a photographer, all that kind of stuff. It was crazy. Right. And like you said, it was like 8 months. I think this story broke in January, and he resigned in September.
Yeah.
It was nuts.
It was it was definitely an intense time. And I think that's, as a testament, though. I mean, I think this is, to the effort that people put in, the effort that the paper put in. Now, I didn't love what they were doing at the time. But then the effort of, our office and the staff to just kind of keep doing their job. I'll share this with you, Ben. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but I guess our listeners as well. When all that was going on, and I got the call from Schaefer. I know Elric called somebody else, but I got the call from Schaefer about the text messages, and went through my protocols and things like that. And then once it became clear that this was going to become a story, the mayor came in and addressed us, right? And he said, he told us, not in great detail, but what was going to happen, and said, I'm going to go away and spend some time with my family and so on and so forth. But he looked us all in the eye and he said, do your job. He says, people are going to say a lot of things are going to come out, but the people of Detroit put us here, put me here, which means they put you here. And during this time, all you need to do is focus on doing your job and supporting them any way you can. And despite whatever people think about that guy, he had us believing and working for the right reason. And I think that in these situations, people want to say, a person's a bad person or whatever. But the reality is sometimes people do bad things or things that weren't appropriate. And it doesn't necessarily mean that everything that that's been done or the people that work there, are bad people. And I think I never thought that the Detroit Free Press necessarily said that, but the reality is that the the fallout from that does cause kind of this concern amongst community sometimes.
Yeah, and I'll share something real quick with you as well, because I was there in the newsroom when that story, I think it posted online at 10 p.m.
Yep.
And then it hit the papers the next day. And a couple of things. Throughout the day, yes, Schaefer and Elric were trying to get comment from the mayor. And at one point, Schaefer walked over to City Hall and asked me to go with him. Mm-hmm. And we went right up to the mayor's office, and we didn't get anything.
Right.
But it was just interesting because he was saying to me, I have no idea what's going to happen after the story posts. We didn't know if there was going to be any reaction at all from the prosecutor. We just didn't know where it would land. We had no idea. It was uncharted territory. And then, man, did it blow up. Wow. It really blew up.
It did. It did. But, your time there was spent doing a lot more than just that, right? I mean, I think that's, you were the cops beat reporter. I mean, obviously that was a big moment for both of us, frankly, in our careers. But we've talked a little bit about off air, the idea of like being an enterprising journalist, right? Going out, finding some stories, some unique things that readers want to know. And there was this story that you told me one time about a turtle that you reported on. It was like this crazy kind of winding, road of a story that you had to go find and dig out. Could you tell our people about that? Like what that's like having to go in and, go find a story.
That was, it was a graffiti artist, a tagger, as they say. And he wrote turtle all over the city, TURDL. And he would draw a little image of a turtle. And the prosecutor at the time, Mike Duggan, who's now mayor of Detroit, he made it a mission to find him and prosecute him. And I found him before Duggan did, and I interviewed him. And by the time I did, Duggan was no longer prosecutor. And Kim Worthy, who prosecuted Kilpatrick, she didn't really care. She didn't charge him with anything. But yeah, I just was out there on the streets and talking to people, trying to, I got into this whole graffiti community. It's such a weird, paranoid community because they go out at night and they try to, to get their tags up, and they want to be recognized and respected by their, their competitors and peers. It was surreal, but it was really fun to go and find him. Another one that I did with a reporter, Suzette Hackney, who's now at USA Today. There was a hitman, Vincent Smothers, who literally worked for drug dealers. He lived in the suburbs. He was married. He had a poodle that he walked, but he would go into the city and do hits for drug dealers and then go back to his life. And when he finally got caught after like a dozen of these, and it was because he killed a cop's wife, and a cop paid him to do so. And that's a whole other story.
Yeah, I remember that.
We went out to his neighborhood out in like Sterling Heights, or it's suburban Detroit, and just like started talking to people and his neighbors, and we got kicked off the property a few times, and it was just, we found his sister. It was just such a surreal story, just such a bizarre, once in a lifetime kind of story. And I actually wrote him a letter in prison. I was interested in writing a book about him, and he wrote me back once, and then it kind of just fizzled. I couldn't get him to communicate with me. And then I saw the New Yorker did a huge piece on him, and I just gave that one up. But man, that was a crazy story. And there's so many other stories like that.
Do you think, are there things that just like, that you've reported on that you think will just stick with you forever? Like, do journalists call them like war stories? Or what do you, like, I don't know, the Smothers, Turtle, the Kilpatrick stuff, like, are those kind of stories like a sense of pride for a journalist? Are those the ones that you keep in the clips and you show off, or how does that register with you all?
They definitely are. And then there's just the untold stories, that like stay with me, that some people like, it's even hard to believe when you tell other people, I was at a crime scene where it was a domestic gone really bad, where a boyfriend shot and killed his wife in a very public place, a church in Detroit. And then he was on the run. So I was at that scene, and I saw a bunch of officers get in their cars and go, and I just followed them. And I got there so early that like the police tape wasn't up, and he was in a backyard, and I'm out in the street getting out of my car, and he ran out from between some houses, and he got shot right in front of me. And I don't even think that the officers knew I was there or that I was a reporter. And I saw it, and it was like, it didn't even seem real.
Yeah.
Like, I went home and told my wife, and I'm like, it was like I was watching it on TV. I just can't. It was something I never forgot, but it still doesn't seem real when I talk about it to you.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, I think of stupid decisions. I was at another crime scene in Detroit and trying to interview witnesses. This one guy's talking to me, and he's like, "Look, I'll tell you what happened, but can you ride me down to the store? I want to get a 40." And I was like, I didn't even think twice. I said, "Yeah, hop in." And in hindsight, like, what the hell was I doing? Like, and I did, and everything went fine. I drove him down. He went to the store. He gave me an interview, and we were on our way. But like, man, I didn't know this guy, and I'm in on the west side of Detroit. Shit. That could have gone wrong in a lot of ways, but it didn't.
Okay. So just like you remembered Al Gore's, sandwich. Do you remember what kind of 40 this guy got? What was his drink of choice? Do you remember?
I don't.
Okay, because he wasn't the focus of the story. He wasn't. I got it.
I think it was in a bag. It was in a bag.
So you never saw it. I got you.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks for sharing.
But I do remember he smoked a cigarette, and like I asked him to crack the window.
Yeah.
I do remember that. Yeah.
Well, those are some great examples of just being dogged, frankly, about doing your job, and I think that's a really important thing. And I think those types of skills and kind of tenacity have translated, right? I mean, you were a reporter, and now you're the deputy managing editor for the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review. Talk to us a little bit about that experience. What's it like in Pittsburgh doing your job?
It's being a manager is so different. I am definitely a street reporter. I love the variety, and I've been in a managerial role for about 4 years now, and there's different victories. You love to see the reporter succeed. You love to help the reporter craft a story that does well, or come up with ideas, or brainstorm, or come out of meetings with good ideas. But yeah, it's definitely much more mundane. It's you're using different energies, and it's good. It's good experience, and I like helping people, and I like helping young reporters and senior reporters. But I definitely miss going out there and creating myself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you talked a little bit about violence earlier. You talked about the need to kind of go out and figure out stories and so forth. And as I understand it, with all the gun violence in our country, constantly having to cover mass shootings, things like that. And in San Diego, we've had our share of things. In 2018, we had a synagogue shooting. And I know you and your team, right, at the Tribune-Review had to work on you worked on a documentary about a synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh. And I know that it had a personal kind of focus for you. There was, a personal kind of toll that happened. Can you talk to us about that? Because when I watched the documentary and read some of the stories in this background, I mean, there were some parallels there with what happened in San Diego, but it seemed like, I don't know, I think our folks who are in San Diego and probably other places across the country would appreciate kind of knowing the inside track about things that happen like that.
Yeah, so in 2018, it was October 27th, Saturday morning, there was a mass shooting at the Tree of Life synagogue, which actually hosts, that building housed 3 congregations, 3 synagogues, if you will, and 11 people were killed.
Wow.
It's called the worst anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history. I think it is. That suspect is actually going to trial. This is very relevant. He's going to trial a week from tomorrow. There's been so many delays, and it's a capital case, death penalty. But it was horrible. And the craziest thing was I was filling in for the Saturday editor. He was on vacation, and the night before was my 30th high school reunion. So I just aged myself. So I was out pretty late, but I knew I had to work the next day. And it was about 9 a.m. and I'm up and getting ready to go in. I started getting some calls about, there's something going on in Squirrel Hill. That's a neighborhood in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And there's an active shooter. You hear this a lot, and this still happens, and you're like, it's probably not true. Well, I started hearing more and more. I'm looking at Twitter. I'm getting phone calls. I'm calling other reporters, and the police spokesman, his name's Chris Togneri. He used to be a reporter for the Trib. So I just thought I'd call him, and he answered the phone, and he was only on the phone. He was, swamped, but he was like, it's true. It's all this is all happening. And he hung up. So once I knew that, I just started dispatching every reporter that I could that lived near there. I was just like, go, go, go. And we covered it throughout the day. And the personal story was that toward the end of the day, it might have been like 11:30 at night. Some of us are in the newsroom. Reporters are still at the scene.
Yeah. And
our CEO, her name's Jennifer Bertetto, she came in and she had some sources, and we didn't have the names of the victims yet. They were going to release them the next day at a press conference. And somebody that she knew had the names and was reading them to her over the phone. And I remember this so vividly. She's speaking them to us as they're being read.
Right.
And she said, Jerry Rabinowitz. That was the name of my physician and my dad's physician.
Okay.
And I stopped and I said, can you say that one again? And I knew he was active in his synagogue. And I knew that wasn't a very common name. I wasn't completely sure it was him, but I was 99%. And I was still in work mode, but I just had to take a moment, walk into a conference room and kind of gather myself. And then the next day it all turned out to be true, that it was my doctor.
Oh, wow.
And I wound up writing a first person piece about it, where I interviewed my dad, because he was my dad's doctor for years. He was my doctor in high school. I left for 20 plus years, came back and went back to him. It was just horrendous. It's one of those memories you don't want to have, but will never go away.
Right. Well, I appreciate you sharing that with us, and I've watched the doc, and I'll put the link to that in these pieces, and maybe for our listeners, maybe that's something to watch here as that story unfolds, if you're interested in seeing how that plays out in Pittsburgh. I think go ahead. And
real quick, I'll talk about I wanted to mention the documentary. So we covered that story and the funerals. There were 11 funerals, and when the year anniversary came up, we decided maybe 6 months before to actually create a video documentary about everything that happened. And we got survivors to talk to us. We got family members. We got the mayor. We did a 45-minute video documentary. I'd never done anything like that.
Yeah.
And it's obviously a terrible story, but it was a very rewarding experience to do something like that. And with the people I worked with, I'll say Sean Stipp in particular was he was the man behind the camera and had a lot of the vision. And it was just, to work for a newspaper and create an online video documentary. I talked about a lot of the negatives of how the business has changed. That's a positive. We can do these things now, and we do.
Yeah. No, that's right. And I think that's, being able to share the story like that. I mean, that's part also the evolution of news, right? I mean, the idea that a newspaper, which used to just be in print, used to be ink and paper, is now, using its digital platforms to be able to share more details and more perspective, and then to your point about helping, right, and being kind of a source for, recognizing the importance of things like this in the community. I mean, I think that sometimes people don't recognize that, papers and journalists and the news organizations, they're part of the community. They get affected. And, you had a personal connection to that, but still had to trudge on and do your job. It's not easy. So I commend you for that and appreciate that.
Yeah. And in the column, I talk about how I was getting the news that night and I texted my dad. Mm-hmm. And he literally told me he fell to his knees sobbing. Wow. And then the next day I was like, Dad, I'm so sorry. I should have called you. I don't know what I was thinking, and just send you a text message like that. Right. Like, that's not something you just text your father.
Yeah.
His doctor's been gunned down. But I was just like in a weird headspace, and I wanted to tell him, but I didn't have time. And I just, so I went on about that in the column.
Yeah. No, that's right. I mean, sometimes you don't. Yeah, it's tough. That is tough. Hey, Ben, I want to ask you one more question a little bit about the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review before we get into our breaking news round. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to, when I was doing my homework, now we know each other, but I was still doing my homework, right? You're out there, I'm out here. And I think I read somewhere that you started the Trib's first diversity committee back in 2020. Did I read that right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely a part of the beginning of it. I again give credit to our CEO. I had a discussion with her, and we decided together to create this. Yes. Okay. We're trying to diversify our staff, and also just diversify our coverage. Yeah. And it's not easy, but yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well, because I've talked to some other journalists, and we've talked a little bit about the importance of diversity of newsrooms, and for folks who can't see Ben, if you're on my social, you'll see pictures of him and so forth. But he's a white dude, and yes, there's an there's an importance for allyship here, and the recognition of, here we have a deputy managing editor who says, hey, we got to get more diverse in our coverage and in our newsroom. Can you talk to me a little bit about why that's important for news?
Yeah, and a lot of that goes back to my time in Detroit, which really molded me because we were diverse, and it's you need every perspective when you make decisions on where to play a story, how to cover a story, where to go, who to talk to. It can't just be a bunch of white dudes in a room.
Yeah,
and it's a problem everywhere in a lot of businesses, but it definitely is something I brought from Detroit. Absolutely. So what we're doing is we're being very deliberate. We're trying to cultivate this locally. So what we have done is come up with a program. It's an internship program and a scholarship program. So we're on our fourth person, but what we do is we take someone getting out of high school locally who's going into college and they want to go into journalism. And we give them $7,500 a year in scholarship. Okay. We give them a paid summer internship every summer, right after high school, and then every summer following, and then that's paid, and then you're offered a job. So we are now up to someone who's going to be a senior, and he's coming back, and it's going to be up to him whether he wants to work here. But the idea from, again, I know I've mentioned Jen Bertetto a few times, was to build something where people come and work for us and they feel comfortable and they want to come back, and you just, because you can't do this overnight. You can't just say, we're going to get diverse and then just, wave a magic wand. Right. So that was the way we decided to do it. And we'll see if it pays dividends. I hope it does. But we just offered our fourth scholarship to someone locally, and it's really cool. So
that's wonderful.
I can't say enough about it. Yeah. And, I will say that I actually sought some advice from. I used to. I'm going to name drop here. I used to work with Jemele Hill at the Free Press. Yeah. When she covered Michigan State. Yeah. And I asked, and we still message. And she's famous now, but she's got a book out. Yeah. But I asked her opinion about this, and she was all about it. She said, you have to even go into middle schools and just start talking to kids locally about journalism. She said, you have to get get people thinking about that kind of a career.
Yeah.
So it's really cool.
Yeah. No, that's great.
And
That's great. I mean, I think that's so important, and I think that's you're right about the Detroit thing, though. I mean, I think that when I went to Wayne State, there was a journalism institute for minorities that was focused on people of color and getting into journalism. I think that I remember like my first shadow event when I was in college. I was shadowing a journalist. It was Suzette Hackney. And
that's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so I think that's and. Suzette Hackney's an African-American journalist. She's now a columnist, if I remember right. USA
That's
Today,
right.
You mentioned that. And I think you saw that in Detroit a lot that mattered to people because it's all about the importance of perspective and then also, to do your job, people want to interact with people that they can relate with. And if I'm so I think that's an important thing. But that perspective, I think, is really important. Whether you're a PR firm or a journalism organization, having diverse thoughts and perspectives in the room making decisions is really important. So I commend you guys. That's fantastic that you're doing that.
Thank you.
Hey, so we're wrapping up here, but I want to get into this what I call the breaking news round, Ben. It's like this do breaking news. These are like, we've talked to you about a lot of things, but like these are one-hit questions. I've kind of done them in different ways lately. I usually ask questions that are about an individual's like personal things, but I've recently adapted this to use the same questions that were asked by James Lipton from the Actors Studio. Because I think it's kind of I don't know. I think it might be kind of interesting, kind of exciting. Might be a couple bad words used here or there, folks. So I'm just letting you know. We'll mark the adult language on the podcast when we drop it. But are you ready for this, Ben? Are you ready to go for the?
Let's give it a whirl.
All right.
Let's do it.
Ben Schmitt, what is your favorite word?
Oh man, apologize in advance, but in over my lifetime, I'd have to say the word dude.
Dude.
Because I use it for everything.
All right. What is your least favorite word?
Least favorite word. Disconnect. I hate that word. I don't know what it means. I hate when people say, "Where's the disconnect?" I hate that word.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Teamwork.
Teamwork.
Yeah.
Right. What turns you off?
Narcissism.
Interesting. What does that mean? Like someone's being narcissistic and that's like, I don't want to deal with that person?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
You just summed it up. Yes.
Okay. All right, Ben, here's the big one. This is the one that's going to make me have to check that mark that says adult language and content. What's your favorite curse word?
Oh, man, I love all of them, but I'm going to go with fuck.
Is there something about it that's like, what makes it your favorite?
I just the same, like, it's like, dude, it's interchangeable.
Yeah.
Like you can say, dude. It's fuck. What the fuck? Fucking kidding me?
Okay.
I love it. It's very similar to dude. That's why I like it.
Yeah, I got you.
It's interchangeable.
What sound or noise do you love?
This is probably cliche. I love the ocean sound.
Okay. What sound or noise do you hate?
Well, I'm a pet owner and I hate the sound of a dog whimpering.
That's a good one. That shows like a lot of you got a lot of compassion there. That's good.
I try.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Lawyer.
Really? Huh.
I would love to be a prosecutor. I love the investigative aspect of attorneys. I love it.
What profession would you not like to do?
Banker. I hate numbers.
You hate numbers. I feel like journalists, PR people, we all hate numbers. That's why you end up with like the researcher on the team, that knows how to do all that kind of stuff. All right, Ben. So here's our final question in the breaking news round. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Well, I hope it does exist, and I would like God to tell me that was fun to watch about my life.
That's great. Well, Ben, this has been a wonderful interview. I really appreciate the fact that you've made the time to come on. I think we've been able to cover some past stuff. We've been able to hear a lot about your work in Pittsburgh. I'd like to ask you, as you would ask anybody you're interviewing, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our Flack Talk listeners before we let you go?
I really liked what we were saying early on about the coexisting nature of PR people and journalists, and we need each other, and we're going to butt heads, but we've got to be professional. I mean, literally, your boss went to jail, and I covered it, and we're friends, and we're talking here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's the way we got to be professional. And I just think that message needs to resonate because this interview is a testament to that.
Yeah. Well, Ben, that's a great way to end the show. I really appreciate you coming on Flack Talk today. Thank you so much.
All right, James. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I look forward to hearing it, and thanks again.
If you liked Flack Talk and want to learn more about your favorite muckrakers and newsbreakers, please hit the subscribe button or visit flacktalk.com. New Flack Talk episodes with James Canning air every other Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts.